Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Yes, welcome back. It is something that we all experience, but for some of us, many of us, it can cripple us from moving forward. It can produce fear. It can do a lot of things. I'm talking about anxiety. It's my understanding that some anxiety is good, that kind of pilots us moving forward. But when it's excessive, you might want to talk to somebody like this gentleman today. He is an amazing psychotherapist. He's back with us. Dr. Barry Pilson joins us on the program. Hey, Barry, how you doing?
Good, Steve. Thanks for having me. I enjoy our discussions.
I do too. Learned so much. And today's could be one of the most important topics that we've tackled in a long time, if ever. What is anxiety? We think we know what it is, but how would you define it?
Yeah, I think that is a good question. We, of course, very commonly hear that we live in an age of anxiety. But what I want to do today is hopefully break that down a little bit and give us a better approach than we generally think of with anxiety.
Sure.
One of the fundamental issues about anxiety that could put us all on the same page is that anxiety is basically a fear-based emotion, meaning that we feel threatened, whether it's internal or external. We'll feel threatened, and then we have a classic kind of reaction when that happens. The fear is often also what sort of speaks to our modern age, is oftentimes accompanied psychologically with uncertainty and unpredictability. It's very difficult for us a lot of times to process those two things. We seek to predict what's going to happen in our environment as well as within ourselves, so that we can approach, do a strategic or a helpful kind of approach. But with uncertainty, that adds to the unpredictability. So anxiety is very much tied to those sort of modern concepts, if you want to call them that, of uncertainty and unpredictability.
Well, there's
which means that a lot of times.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go.
Everything is uncertain. Like, do you know what's going to happen in the next 5 seconds with full certainty?
No,
nobody does.
No,
right?
No, nobody does. Nobody does. And that's the point. But coupled with that, though, is if you were going to tell me if I was going to bet that the world's going to blow up in the next 5 seconds, I would say no. Okay. Not that I'm certain of that, but that's probably a good guess.
Sure.
At least, that would drive some positive behavior as opposed to the world's going to blow up in 5 seconds. Okay. So what we do, though, is we seek to decrease our fear by increasing certainty and predictability. Now, we try to do that, and sometimes we get lost in that. And, we have such a complicated world with so much stimulation impinging on us all the time, whether it's from our interpersonal relationships, whether it's from our business, whether it's from, the environment in general, whether it's from media. It's difficult to be certain and predict things as well. So let me just say one more thing about that. So what happens is that in terms of fear, there's a specific area of the brain that is highly responsive to fear, and it's called the amygdala. Maybe some people have heard of that, AMYGDALA. And that's what that part of the brain does, is it alerts another part of the brain where we secrete certain hormones in the pituitary gland that specifically increases our adrenaline. So we're ready, as we've always classically heard, to kind of take some action, to flight or to fight. That's the classic kind of notion about that. But again, we don't have a whole lot of room for fighting or flighting in our culture. So what we'll also tend to do is freeze. So we'll go into the sort of deer in the headlights mode. And often that is our response. But the idea is that it taps into a certain part of the nervous system where we're ready for action. We want to take some kind of action. The issue is what's the best action to take? It's often unknowable.
Is this similar to fight or flight?
Yeah, I mean that's really what it means.
Okay.
That's what I mean in a very simplistic way. I'm trying to break it down just so you have understanding that if you're ready to fight or flight, your body is on alert. You're on alert, and in a way, and you mentioned this earlier, that's adaptable. You're ready to take action. You're on alert. You're trying to get moving. You're trying to get going. You're trying to do something. On the other hand, too much stress in that sense, or too much fear, too much adrenaline pumping hormones in your brain and in your body starts to break down your health. It breaks down your, too much can break down your immune system, and you're susceptible then to diseases. The most famous, not the most famous, but the most prevalent ones that we seem to experience in our modern culture are autoimmune diseases, like fibromyalgia, or this sort of chronic fatigue that people experience as well. Now, some people try to, and it's not that they're not, that we also are susceptible a lot of times to other viruses when our immune system breaks down, you see. So we kind of live, we kind of, in terms of trying to be healthy, some people try to reduce what's called the inflammation in our bodies, which is that sort of ongoing hormonal stress that breaks down certain elements of the body and makes us difficult to, to stay healthy. That's the real thing about it, okay?
Is much of what we're talking about almost evolutionary, where our subconscious just wants to protect us? So when
Yes.
something is a little off, you don't know what's coming next, or you're just not comfortable in a situation. I think what I'm getting from you, Barry, it's the anticipation of the unpredictable. We're
Right.
not really wired for change. So if there's something
That's
that
right.
we may be uncomfortable with, it's outside of our wheelhouse. That's where the anxiety starts.
Right. And it makes sense from an adaptable aspect. If you're used to participating in certain habits or rituals, what does that mean? It means that you're expecting certain outcomes, okay?
Right.
And when those outcomes occur, naturally, you feel safe, all right? But when they don't occur, then the stress system comes on, and again, you're ready for action. So you get hypervigilant, you get your thinking goes a little bit, gets more intense. And again, it's healthy in a way at the moment, but ongoing, it's not. And again, in our culture where things are happening all the time, it's difficult to stay focused a lot of times.
Would you say, and we're going to get into what to do to combat anxiety and all of that, but would you say that some anxiety is good? Like, for example, let's say a lot of people have fear of public speaking. So let's say you have a report to deliver, maybe it's even on a Zoom, and now you're getting some anxiety. But I've often heard that it's a good thing because it can get you fired up and just like
That's right.
push forward, unless it gets past that. Does that sound reasonable?
That's very good and very clear that a certain low dose, if you want to call it of anxiety, is good for you. It gets your sympathetic nervous system in gear. You become more alert. Your pupils may dilate. You become, your heart rate may increase, so that you can access information better in public speaking. Okay, for instance.
Sure.
So yes, in that sense, anxiety is helpful, and it's been well known for many years in psychological circles that a little anxiety is good for you. Too much anxiety is not, and that's really what I'm talking about. Really,
Is too much anxiety also known as stress?
Yes. So that's the point. And we, again, in our culture, we just love to talk about how much stress there is.
Yes.
Or people, it's almost a second language. I'm stressed. Oh, this is stressful. All right. Which, so then the question becomes, well, gee, what do you do with all that stress? How do you manage that stress? What do you avoid? What do you run away from?
Sure.
Get out of toxic relationships. Now, all those things I'm not saying are not helpful, but the whole point is that we're kind of short circuiting ourselves if we're just trying to manage our stress. That is what I wanted to elaborate on a little bit today.
Gotcha.
That anxiety is not a stress management kind of problem, even though you can, in a short-term basis, make it that, okay? But long-term is how do we really deal with unpredictability, fear, and uncertainty, okay? Well, what we want to do is engage other aspects of our brain, not just the fear, flight, kind of freezing response. And the best way to do that, and I've talked about this before, but the best way to do that is, as opposed to just reducing your stress in your immediacy, is to engage in goal-directed behavior. You and I have talked about that before, where you're motivated to acquire or to seek something. And that when you're motivated, you're now not just dealing with stress, but you're activating another part of the brain, which the simple part of that is that involves what's called the dopamine system, which is the reward system. And so if you're seeking to accomplish something, or you're trying to figure out how to move forward, then you have to set up certain goals. And the brain is very good, by the way, at looking at how are you doing in terms of achieving those goals. And it actually comes from the dopamine system. So let me just say this and I'll let you talk. The best way to set a goal is to be, it's something called a SMART goal, SMART. And that means that a goal is, now this is ideal, is specific, measurable, that's the M, the A is attainable, the R is relevant, and the T is timely. So a good goal has those elements. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant to you, and it's timely. You have a certain time period that you can look at. All right. If you're moving towards achieving that goal, and you have an outcome that tells you you're closer or that you have achieved a small objective, then you're going to get a shot of dopamine in your brain, okay? You're actually going to trigger a dopamine response that is recognized by a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex that tells you you're on task, which is the best way to deal with anxiety, you see.
So it's at that moment, that dopamine hit is kind of justification. Like, is it saying you're in a good place now? Don't worry.
Yeah, it's a signal. It's
okay.
Like a
signal. It's great.
In a simple way, it's just a signal to your brain that hey, I met this task. It's measurable. I can not just justify it, but I can relate to it, and I did it in a timely way. That feels good.
Right.
All right. That feels good.
Love it.
Yeah.
When we're talking about anxiety, and before we go into more of ways to combat or deal with, what about the traumas that we've suffered? Is there connections there?
Yes, and that's a good question. I appreciate that. Because what will happen is that the fear response, I was talking about, feeling stress and getting alert and your heart rate increasing also, is it also can access memories of bad experiences, okay? Which is, as you just said, a trauma response. So not only are you motivated, you're driven to do something. Now, you may be clouded by previous trauma when you experience this stress, and then you can move into a whole spiral of my outcomes are going to be difficult, not achievable, all right, and everything's going to fall apart. Obviously, that's going to increase your anxiety.
I also look at it in terms of mindset, and I want to share with you, I used to have anxiety about blood tests.
Okay.
I would worry about them. it would be, I got it coming up. I'd actually change the date. I'd get close to it. Like, I can wait another couple of days. It was like a routine test. Actually, I probably have one tomorrow. I'm going to see a doctor. I think, they're going to probably draw some blood for additional testing, whatever. It's all good. But I changed my mindset. And instead of me worrying about, well, how am I going to react? What happens if I get nervous? What happens if I pass out? What if this? What if that? And I had an experience, side note, I already had anxiety about it, but years ago, I was getting blood drawn, typical lab, and the phlebotomist left the band on my arm and started talking to a coworker. And I said, after a few minutes, I'm like, yes, can we take this off? She comes over, releases the band, and the pressure was like, I think I'm going down. I didn't. It was all good, but just add to the anxiety. Now I flip the mindset, and now I look at it as, oh, I'm getting information. I'm doing something for myself. This is a good thing. Might not be totally happy with the information. Maybe it's going to be good this time. Who knows? But at least I'm being proactive. And I just have a conversation with the person that's drawing. In 20 seconds, I'm done. I don't even know what happened. So the mindset shift worked for me and in other areas as well, in terms of not anticipating what's coming up, but living here in the moment. Any thoughts on the mindset?
Well, I think that's a great example. And easy to relate to, especially the sort of trauma memory of, leaving the band on and being uncertain about what all that meant, and then having a bad experience after that. So, it's easy to get stuck there. And like you said, then part of your ongoing response might have been for a while is, well, I'm going to avoid this. I can't do this. I'm avoiding this.
Sure.
And that in a stress related quick response, that makes sense. I'm going to avoid this. But I mean, you said it beautifully. As soon as I had a mind shift to, okay, why am I doing this? What am I trying to accomplish? What is the blood test going to tell us? What kind of information? And where can I go from here? Then, okay, I'll deal with the phlebotomist in a positive way. I'll just talk to him or her for a little while, sort of distract myself, and maybe keep things in the present and a good system.
I'll bet you that I was doing what you just described, the SMART system, with the mindset shift and didn't even realize it. Because if you put it through the SMART filter, right?
You'll find it. That's right. So I'm just giving you a sort of an algorithm for that. But we do it we do it automatically, and that's the best way to say it. A better question is what you just said. It's not necessarily what's the SMART, but what mindset do I need to shift so that what I'm doing here is something that's helpful to me and to the situation. Okay?
Absolutely. Barry, any final thoughts? We're almost out of time. We have a few minutes. Anything that else stands out about anxiety and kind of controlling it?
Yeah, well, actually that's a good word, is control. People think that the more I can control things, the less anxiety I'm going to have. But the other side of that is instead of being on outcome on what you can control and what you cannot control, what you do is you become process oriented. How do I want to approach things? Do I stop at red lights? Do I, if I'm in a conversation with somebody, how do I approach it? If I don't like what they're saying, how do I approach that?
Sure.
And if the key word is not to avoid or go away or run away from, but it's to approach. And it's not that you're going to necessarily reduce the uncertainty or the unpredictability in the world, but you will also have a little template for you to follow, where if it's unpredictable or uncertain, it's not the end of the world. That's the key.
Such great tips. And of course, therapy can be amazing to help walk you through and realize these things. And there's different forms of therapy. and such.
Yeah.
I found people that have had therapy for anxiety, and it's helped. Of course, there's medications. I'm a big proponent of try and avoid the meds if you need to, but of course, if it gets to a certain point,
Yes.
that's your answer.
I am too. And basically, what you always hear about in terms of therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy. And the cognitive behavioral therapy basically it covers a lot of waterfronts, to be honest. It's a little bit of it says something that doesn't say anything. But the main thing that it does is what we just said, is it tries to make you conscious of certain thoughts that precede certain feelings. So the idea of that is that your thoughts are going to trigger certain feelings. And if you shift your thoughts instead of trying to change your feeling, then you have a better chance of moving forward in a positive direction. It's the mindset that you said. It's we call it mindfulness these days. It's just anything that helps change a little bit of your belief system at the moment, or just reorganizes some of your thoughts. And really, therapy is good at doing that. By the way,
Sure,
therapy is helpful. It's in the present.
Taken me years to get to the point where I feel that I really don't have anxiety. I can honestly say it.
Good.
I pilot by one thing. Nothing surprises me anymore at this point. 5 years ago, it would be completely different. I would be in freak out mode over almost anything. Now it's just a lot of times you don't have a choice. Yeah. The plane is waiting. You have to get on it if you want to travel. So you have to realize it.
That's right.
I'm not minimizing anybody's anxiety. I know it's not easy. I totally get it. But there are ways to work with it. And you're one of them. Right. Barry, how do we find you?
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. Anyway, I have a website, Barry Pilson, Ph.D. .com. And that's one way to get in touch if you want to. Okay.
And you can do things virtually too, right?
Yeah, I can do things virtually. And I'll certainly be open to answering questions if you want, through emails as well. Okay.
Excellent.
So I don't see this just as a therapy process, but as an educational process.
And that's why we're here. And that's why I appreciate you and all the insight and just breaking these things down. Anxiety is so huge for so many people. So I'm glad we talked about it. Once again, the website is Barry Pilson, Pilson, Ph.D.com.
Right, .com. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll catch
up.
All
right.
Next
We'll
time.
See you next time. All right. Bye-bye.
We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Woo! Let's get crazy!
In movies, when someone at a party jumps into a pool fully dressed, everyone cheers them on and jumps in too. Just so you know, in real life parties, nobody jumps in after you. You just look stupid.
Come on, jump in! Come on!
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.